On July 9th, Iran buried a man who was killed more than 4 months earlier. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was assassinated on February 28th in a joint US-Israeli strike that opened this entire war. And yet, his funeral only just happened 6 days of processions stretching across Tehran, Qom, Najaf, Karbala, and finally Mashhad, the city where he was born, where he was laid to rest at the Golden Dome shrine of Imam Reza, one of the holiest sites in Shia Islam. Iranian state media claims more than 40 million people turned out across the 6 days. Even independent estimates put the crowd above 15 million. Delegations arrived from roughly 30 countries, senior officials from Russia, China, Pakistan, and Turkey among them, alongside representatives from Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. Mourners in Mashhad carried red flags, symbolizing revenge, and chanted that they would kill Donald Trump. Think about what the funeral actually represents. When the United States and Israel opened this war by killing the supreme leader of Iran in a single strike, the working assumption in Washington was that this would trigger collapse, that a decapitated regime would crumble under its own weight. 4 months later, Iran just staged what its own state media called the largest procession the world has ever witnessed. That's not the image of a state on the verge of falling apart. It's a state that used its most painful moments as a demonstration of exactly how much reach, loyalty, and religious authority it still commands across the region. Whatever the killing was meant to accomplish, the funeral was Iran's answer, and it was watched by nearly every major power on earth. While the world's attention was fixed on Mashhad, the ceasefire this entire mourning period was supposed to be protected by was already falling apart somewhere else. Israel never actually stopped striking Lebanon. Despite a US-broked framework agreement signed back in June, Israeli forces kept hitting targets in southern Lebanon, in Nabatea, in Kafar, Tebnit, killing civilians in the process, a school principal, her mother, a domestic worker, and a Syrian national among those killed in just one strike on a car in early July. Iran has been explicit that this matters far beyond Lebanon's border. Tehran has stated outright that continued Israeli strikes and continued occupation of Lebanese territory counts as a direct violation of its MOU with Washington. And Iranian officials say Israel breached the Lebanon ceasefire more than 80 times in just 2 days back in June. Even before the current crisis, the foundation of the entire US-Iran agreement was already cracking. Then came the trigger. In early July, Iran attacked commercial vessels transiting through the Strait of Hormuz. The United States responded with its heaviest strikes on Iranian territory since the earlier ceasefire took hold, hitting the port city of Sirik, Qasem Island, Bandar Abbas, and Kharg Island, the terminal responsible for roughly 90% of Iran's oil export. Iran fired back at American positions across the Gulf, and within days, Trump formally declared his own ceasefire is over. US Central Command has kept up strikes since, describing them as efforts to, in their own words, degrade Iran's ability to keep attacking ships. And Iran's answer was the most consequential move of the entire standoff. It shut the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's Persian Gulf Strait Authority announced that because of what it called hostile US actions, passage through the Strait of Hormuz was, in its own words, currently unfeasible, and that going forward, the only way to get permission to transit would be through the Iran's own website. Roughly a fifth of the entire world's oil trade normally moves through the single waterway. Shutting it isn't a symbolic gesture. It's closer to detonating an economic weapon without single explosive going off. So now the fight has shifted to something almost as strange as the shutdown itself, a battle over who actually gets to run the strait. On Monday, Trump announced that the United States would become what he called the guardian of Strait of Hormuz, reinstating that naval blockade on Iranian ports and vessels while declaring the strait open in his own words with or without Iran. But there was a catch. Trump said Washington would charge a 20% fee on all cargo shipped through the strait, framing it as a fair reimbursement for a security service the US claims it has been providing for free for 50 years, and strongly implying that wealthy Gulf oil producer should be ones footing that bill. Iran's own foreign minister fired back almost immediately, insisting Tehran, not Washington, controls the strait and deserves to be compensated for it. Though he did concede that 20% was, in his own words, too much. Even the United Nations' own maritime body has said there is no legal basis for either side to be charging tolls on any international waterway at all. So you now have two different countries that don't control a shared strait between them, each trying to unilaterally tax the entire global shipping industry for privilege of passing through it. Here is why Iran's position in this standoff is stronger than most people assume. This isn't improvisation. Iran has built its entire military doctrine around exactly this scenario for decades, anticipating a day when the US or Israel will come for it directly. The strait itself works in Iran's favor geographically. Its narrowest point squeezed between Iranian territory and the mountainous coastlines that gives Iranian forces natural high ground to absorb and strike vessels attempting passage without permission. Iran doesn't need a blue water navy to compete with the United States here. It needs fast attack boats, coastal missile batteries, mines, and drones, all of which it has spent years stockpiling specifically for this choke point. That's the uncomfortable math behind why, even facing the most powerful military on earth, Iran's chances of maintaining real control or at least real disruption over the strait remains genuinely high. And the man now setting Iran's terms has been remarkably consistent since the day he took power. Mujtaba Khamenei succeeded his father as supreme leader in March, delivered through a statement read by a news anchor, since he has never once appeared in public or on camera, believed by US officials to have been seriously wounded in the same strike that killed his father, mother, wife, and more relatives. In the very first address, he vowed the Strait of Hormuz would stay closed to pressure Iran's enemies, and that American bases across the region should be shut down immediately or face attack. By April, he was pledging to personally secure the Gulf region and eliminate what he called the enemy's exploitation of the waterway. By May, his message had hardened further. Regional nations would no longer serve as shield for American bases, and his own words, the hands of time to do not turn backward. Just this week, as the new round of strikes began, Iranian state media again attributed a statement to him vowing that Iran would fight until the last soldier remains and the US forces have no future presence in the region, full stop. Strip away the religious framing, and Khamenei's actual objective is bigger than the strait itself. This is explicitly about ending American and Israeli dominance in the region altogether. And he is not doing it alone. Russia sent former President Dmitry Medvedev to the funeral personally. China sent a senior standing committee official. Both countries have deepened military and economic ties with Tehran throughout this war, and both have a direct interest in watching the United States get bogged down in a conflict it cannot cleanly win, tied up in a region where Washington increasingly has less and less actual control over the outcome. Every additional week this standoff drags on is a week Moscow and Beijing get to watch American attention. Money and military assets get consumed somewhere other than Ukraine or the Pacific. So where does this actually go? Nobody can say this with confidence, and that unpredictability is precise the point. What's clear, the world is staring down a global energy shock unlike anything experienced in this war so far. Oil prices have already jumped sharply on this news alone. If Iran maintains effective control over even part of the strait, if the American blockade and Trump's proposed 20% toll actually get enforced, the ripple effects hit far beyond the Gulf, into every economy that depends on that oil, keeping global supply chains moving. And underneath the economic story is a simpler, more human one. A man who has never shown his face in public is now dictating terms to the most powerful military in the world, from a position built on decades of preparation for exactly this moment, backed quietly by two of the most other powerful nations on earth. While ordinary people from Tehran to the Gulf to the wider global economy wait to see who blinks first. Keep watching this one closely, because what happens next in the Strait of Hormuz isn't just going to decide this war, it's going to shape how much power the United States actually has left to project in this region at all.